Grahame, thank you both very much for joining us. Now, Grahame, I know you did watch the Barnaby Joyce interview last night, so let me start with you. What was your take on it all?
Well, I couldn't have done it. And it just occurred to me...
Well, done the interview or been the interviewee?
No, I couldn't have done the interview. And I was thinking, of all the divorced people in Australia and all the people who had sort of unintended children, I can't think of a couple who's actually been through that before on national television.
There were some awkward moments there.
Oh, look, everything. You know, what are they doing there? Body language, some of the answers. And you think, well, the upside is, one hopes, is that was the stopper. And until they did the interview, and particularly until Vikki gave her views, we're always going to have a media frenzy everywhere. Are there still some unanswered questions? Yes. But Barnaby's never going to talk about his first family, so all of that stuff doesn't matter what the media says.
I think that was the right call.
So do I.
Fair enough.
So do I. But, you know, you sat there and you wince and you cringe and you think, oh, she didn't say that, did she? And extraordinary television.
Yeah, look, a lot of things weren't even asked, Bruce. Did you watch it? And, you know, what did you think? I mean, there was no questions about Vikki Campion getting jobs in other offices, no questions.
But that had already been answered. Minister Canavan, and I'd seen that, but that had already been answered.
We don't know a lot about what went on between Barnaby Joyce, Matt Canavan. You know, there's a lot still we don't know about those jobs. We don't know what the Prime Minister was told about this affair. You know, when did he first? You know, I certainly would have been asking about that. And when he admitted, Bruce, that he knew he had to step down way back mid last year when she became pregnant. Why then did he go on and contest this by-election without telling a soul? Telling the voters, that is. Why didn't he tell his National Party colleagues back then that I'm going to have to go as leader, I'm afraid, guys?
Yeah. Well, I watched it and I had the same reaction as a lot of people. I think it was cringe-worthy in large part. I had a little bit of sympathy for Vikki, none for him. And I think the issue that really comes out and all that is, you know, why, if it's true that you realised at that point when she became pregnant that you wouldn't be able to continue on as Deputy Prime Minister, did you stay on in the job for so long and hang on and hang on? I don't think he was actually being quite honest with us about that. I suspected he thought, you know, somehow he'd be able to survive, because I don't know why he would have put us all through that and himself through it as well if he'd come to a rational decision so early in the piece that it was all over.
Yeah, Grahame, just on that point, do you believe Barnaby Joyce when he says he knew he had to go, or do you think...
Well, I just wasn't quite sure on the timing in his own mind for that. You know, yes, it would cross his mind immediately. Jingoes, have I got to go? But common sense would tell you that most people in that position would think, hang on, I think we can probably manage this, and then you realise, no, I can't. I can't. So I wasn't as you know, anxious about that answer as many others. I sounded like human reaction to me.
Just before we leave all this, honestly, Grahame, do you think he can run again in New England? Can he be revived?
Well, there's a difference between can and would he want to. He's got a 14% margin, so even if he lost half of that, could he win? Yes. Will he have some bark taken off him? Yes. But is his heart in it? And I think, you know, one hopes he's having a bit of a breakdown, sorts himself out, sorts the baby out. Incidentally, bloody good-looking baby.
Very cute. I agree with that.
And he comes back, and either he comes back on firing for the team, he's been a bit funny lately, or you can just tell that, no, I'll go and do some boards, and there'll be plenty of boards wanting.
Well, sadly, that wasn't asked either, whether he wants to stick around in politics. But let's move on. Bruce, One Nation. You know, you and Grahame have both watched One Nation, you know, rise and fall over the past 20 years or so. Where do you think the party's at now?
I think it's in a position where it finds itself quite often, actually, in politics, and that is they have a bit of a surge. Pauline Hanson gets some members around her, and then for some reason she manages to lose them almost as quickly as she found them. And to give you a demonstration of that point, between 1996 and 2006, there were 21 nation members elected to parliaments in Queensland and nationally, and I think in New South Wales. Of those, only 4 who started off in the party room at the beginning of their term were in the party room, the One Nation party room, at the end. 16 of the 20 had already left before they contested the next election or left Parliament. That's the sort of party it is. It just seems to be incapable of holding people together. And that goes, I think, in part to the choice of candidates. And it has to have a lot to do, I think, with the personality of their leader. And I don't think anyone should be in any doubt about that. I think she's a very difficult person. She must be a very hard person to work with. And the people who she chooses to be her running mates seem to be very unstable when it comes to being able to stick with the team.
Look, clearly there are internal issues there, Grahame, but the one difference I'd say now with One Nation as opposed to, its previous incarnations is it's been given a lot more legitimacy by the fact they've had the seats they have in the Senate. Yeah, there have been some, wacky moments like wearing the burqa and flip-flopping on company tax and so on, but other parties are willing to deal with One Nation now. Certainly the Liberal Party is, minor parties as well. Does that mean, despite all this, they're going to be here for a while yet?
Well, the answer is yes, but with a few qualifications. Senator Hanson has lost a hell of a lot of power because she's no longer a blocker. The government does not have to have her in the pack. They would want her, but, her 3 votes used to be important on every vote. Not the case anymore, 4 votes. Look, I'm actually beginning to think that people like Pauline Hanson, Senator Xenophon, Clive Palmer, lots of them, they make a noise, they get elected, and all of a sudden they think they're some sort of messiah and they need disciples around them. And you think, Pauline, maybe don't. Just make sure that you get re-elected. Senator Xenophon, I'd have said the same thing. The minute they go outside that sort of self-circle, they start getting these other people who think that they are then God. And control disappears, there's a hell of a mess, and it tarnishes the main brand, which is the person.
Yeah, well,
Pauline at the moment, the last couple of weeks, looked terrible.
There's an element of truth in that. These people sort of operate on the cult of the personality. She certainly did for a long time. I think it's somewhat diminished now. Xenophon has tried to do that. I'm not so sure about Clive Palmer. I think he just used a lot of money to get elected. But these characters are would-be demagogues. This is the nature of populism. They want to be seen as being the strong anti-establishment candidates who can cross from the left to the right in a tweet, like that. And so they attract people who are disaffected, often for very good reasons, with the main parties. But when it actually comes to sitting down and doing the business of politics in the Parliament, it becomes a very, very different story. And that's what we're seeing with her. As I said, 20 people became One Nation members of Parliament between 1996 and 2006, and only 4 of them were there at the end of their term. 4 as One Nation members. The rest had just disappeared. It's just the way that this party seems to operate. And I think it's an important point that political establishment parties need to make, that, you do need stability in politics. And even amongst them, where there's sometimes a lack of stability, it's nothing compared to what we're seeing with these characters when they actually get into positions of authority.
Well, it raises the most immediate question is what happens in Longman, right? This is where One Nation's vote is going to be important, really important, in deciding who's going to win this, the LNP or Labor. One Nation preferenced Labor last time in 2016. They're not doing that this time. We had a poll yesterday, Grahame. It put the government ahead. The One Nation vote, well, the other vote, which I assume was mostly One Nation, was up above 13%. Which is going to be really, really significant. How do you think One Nation's going to go? And more broadly, what are your thoughts on that poll yesterday?
Well, look, they'd probably pull up in that sort of seat just short of double figures, and that will be important in deciding who wins. But I think this is really becoming, even if that poll is half right, David, this is becoming really, really important. The average swing against a government in all by-elections is 4%. In all of my by-elections, Wannon, Corangamite, Bruce, Moreton, Oxley, Adelaide, there's a whole bunch of them. The average swing was 4.7 against the government, and most of those were against Bob Hawke. We look as if we might have a swing to the government in one or two of these seats. That's history-breaking. That is seriously... You know, people will say, oh, Grahame, you're just talking politics. No, I'm not. This is really serious for Bill Shorten come later in the year. If one or two of these seats accidentally went to the government, that is history-making, ground-breaking politics, and Bill would be in terrible, terrible trouble.
Well, Bruce, that's true, isn't it? If Labor were to lose 2 of these seats, yes, Bill Shorten would be in great trouble. I'm told, you know, and yes, these are just one-off polls at the start of a long campaign, but I'm told from sources in both Labor and the Liberal Party that it sort of reflects or gets close to where their numbers are internally as well.
Well, I think you do need to be concerned with marginal seats in a volatile political environment like the one we have at the moment. I don't think Shorten's under threat from within the party, and I think that's been made clear. And also the rules that Kevin Rudd introduced, which apply to opposition leaders as much as to prime ministers, prevent a coup of the sort that he suffered. So I think the party will stick with Shorten whatever happens, and I think they should stick with him because he's taken them to within a whisper of government.
Even if they lose 2 seats, you don't think there'd be
I think it'd be a disaster.
Panic that the bloke can't win?
It'd be a disaster to go down that path. We saw it before when we had from Rudd to Gillard to Rudd again. You know, we don't want to go down that path. Everyone knows that. But can we talk just a little bit about...
Bruce,
no, hang on. Can we just talk a little bit...
This would be...
Look,
this would be the first time. Most of these have sitting members, sitting Labor Party members. So you would think the swing would be more than 4%.
Okay, so can we just talk about the by-elections for a moment? I'm happy to talk about that. You know, I've got to say, I am a little bit sceptical about this Reachtel poll that's been commissioned. For example, when questions were asked about support for the corporate taxes, you know, it was a very strong endorsement for that in Braddon and in Longman, and that doesn't really ring true to me if they're talking about tax cuts for the banks, like the Commonwealth Bank and others, the big business end of town. I can believe that they might be supportive of small business taxes, which are already through anyway. I just don't buy it that in those electorates, particularly one like Longman, which does have a significant One Nation constituency, is going to be enamoured with the idea of giving massive tax relief to the big end of town. These electorates aren't the sort of electorates, don't have the sort of people in them who believe, quite rightly, that the big end of town should be getting money ahead of them when they're doing it so tough. So I am a little bit sceptical about the polls at the outset. So, and it's a long time before the election. I think it's the end of July. So there's a long time between now and then.
Yeah, look, anything could happen between now and then. That's true. That's true.
And one other point on this, you know, that I think is worth pointing to is that in respect of One Nation, the split that's occurred in One Nation between her and the other senator is over the question of tax cuts for the big end of town. You know, she doesn't want them anymore because she sees them, I think quite rightly, as being damaging to the One Nation brand. And this other guy, he's had a handshake and he thinks he's bound by it. So hence the split that's occurred between her and Brian Burston. So even in the One Nation, you've got this division about what should happen. So you've got all these variables happening at once. But I suspect that if Labor sticks with a hard line policy in both Braddon and in Longman of saying no to these big tax cuts, that they're on a winner, and with Turnbull having to go out there every day and explain why the banks and everything that's been revealed about the banks on a daily basis in the Royal Commission being part of the conversation should deserve a 5% tax cut. It doesn't work for me. I just don't believe it. I've been around too long. It doesn't fit for my part.
Fair enough. And look, today the CBA $700 million settlement certainly puts the banks in the docks once again on that front, no doubt about it. All right, Grahame, Bruce, we've got to go. But look, thank you both very much for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Just before we go to the break...